Good morning. I'm Linda Brent, Director of Strategic Planning for the National Training and Simulation Association. On behalf of Admiral Jim Robb, President of NTSA, I would like to welcome you to our 2023 webinar series. We are very excited today to be talking about two topics relatively new to our community, the metaverse and U.S. Space Force. SpaceVerse is a new and bold vision established by U.S. Space Force to embrace technical collaboration and create a digital metaverse that converges terrestrial and space physical and digital realities, providing a simulated environment for training. We have a distinguished panel of experts with us today to share this vision. I'm sure you're going to have many questions throughout the webinar, and if you do, please use the Q&A tab that's up in your upper right-hand corner and type in your questions. We look forward to that discussion. Our panel today is going to be led by Jennifer Arnold. Jennifer has over 30 years of experience in the simulation and training industry, working at innovative performance and learning companies. She is currently an executive at NVIDIA, responsible for bringing Omniverse to the federal marketplace. She has been recognized with award-winning contributions to defense, intelligence, federal, and commercial clients. Her focus is on applying immersive AI, cyber, and digital technologies to drive game-changing mission and business solutions. Her career experience includes building and managing performance improvement organizations with specialized expertise in mission-related systems integration, training, education, and strategic organizational transformation. As many of you already know, Jen has been an active member of the ITSIC family for more than 17 years and had the honor of serving as conference chair in 2021. Thank you, Jen, for all you do for this community. I will now turn the presentation over to you and your panel. We look forward to it.
Thank you, Linda. As you know, the team is absolutely thrilled to be here today, and we're just very excited about the opportunity. So today, we are going to discuss how NVIDIA, Cesium, Epic Games, and MAXAR Technologies all came and worked together with the U.S. Space Force and Space Launch Delta 45 to demonstrate the potential of the SpaceVerse. And as you said, it's an incredibly bold vision. So we are going to discuss the motivations and the technologies behind the proof of concept built on open standards, very important, along with collaboration. We're going to demonstrate an SLD-45 space launch. So we'll also cover our go-forward plan to continue building on the SpaceVerse concept. So those of you that know me, and as Linda pointed out, I've been a part of the community family for many years, I normally wouldn't have this many people on a panel. However, it is incredibly important to us regarding the ecosystem. And as you heard Linda say, the U.S. Space Force embraces technical collaboration, which is exactly what we've done. So you'll get an opportunity to hear from our ecosystem. So we are going to dive right in with Mr. Mike Torres, who is Chief of Digital Infrastructure and SpaceVerse, U.S. Space Force Chief Technology and Innovation Office. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate the introduction, and I'm honored to be a part of this panel. So at the Space Force, we are looking at digital twinning and modeling simulations in a little bit of a different way. One of the aspects of military operations is trying to figure out how to improve the overall experience of the warfighter, and more importantly, figuring out a way to operationalize these capabilities to improve how we defend our nation's interests. So there are three basic principles that we're looking to engage the modeling and simulation world, specifically the e-gaming world, like Epic, like Unity, like NVIDIA, as an example. And that's to drive three principles. One, if we don't figure out how to get beyond testing and training and have a live operational digital twin capability, we're really not going to be able to achieve the metaverse expectation of the future, that future internet replacement per se, live, on, all the time, and so on. The second aspect of this is the ability to run co-simulation across multiple platforms. And the general premise is there isn't going to be a one platform win it all. There's not, that's unrealistic. The reality is that in order to enable the metaverse to work, a verse of verses to work, we need to come together as a community, government, industry, academia, to really solve the problem of live real-time integration. And the way we see that isn't by standardizing the platforms as much as it is standardizing the exchange of data at all layers of architecture. So a lot of this conversation today, I would argue that the primary purpose of the conversation today is really to discuss the power of open exchange standards, and more importantly, the potential it presents to allow everyone to participate in this ecosystem without restricting or eliminating someone from the equation. And then lastly, at least for myself and the government, one of the things that we struggle with is that fine balance between needing what we want and basically restricting industry from giving us the goodness of what they can bring to the table through unnecessary burdensome requirements, right? So in this particular case, what we're advocating is we want to allow competitive advantage to occur within the rich feature sets of the platform. In other words, Unity, Epic, Omniverse, and all the other players in the industry don't have to have a standardized platform. That's where they set themselves apart from the rest and from each other. But what they should do is come together and focus on a common, again, open standards exchange that will allow for the unification of data in real time in a verse of verse environments. Because you can't have a verse of verses if all the verses have to be the same. So lastly, I'll leave you with this thought. The general premise of trying to drive open standards isn't all standards for all things. That's always been a recipe for failure. The goal for open standards, at least in this case, at least in our case, is to drive open standards for exchange. And what that means, we need to come together as a community to create and solve the what I'm calling a universal verse standard suite, which basically it's like the 1970s and 1980s protocols war where TCP/IP rose above the rest. We need to come together and figure out what that suite of standards are for exchange across the entire stack in order to make this work. So with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague and partner, Major Andrew Compton, Commander of the Spaceport Integration Office, who leads a lot of the technologies that are being used for launch out in Florida.
Thanks, Mike. On behalf of Space Launch Delta 45, my team has been excited to provide the use case which motivates the operational side of this effort. So again, thank you, Mike, for the introduction. Again, my name is Major Andrew Compton. I'm a developmental engineer in the United States Space Force, and I'm currently assigned to Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, where I lead the Spaceport Integration Team for Space Launch Delta 45. The Delta operates the nation's eastern range, which is known as the world's premier gateway to space, earning that title by enabling assured access to space from the Cape and NASA's Kennedy Space Center. In recent years, we've seen unprecedented growth in the commercial space industry, which drove increased demand for launch operations. Since 2019, the launch rate from the Eastern Range has tripled, and we're expecting another 50% growth in 2023. So last year, we hit just above 50 launches. We're expecting close to 100 this year. This increased demand has driven us to explore opportunities to modernize, upgrade, and automate our range capabilities to be scalable to keep pace with future needs. We recognize the need to aggressively tackle integrated operations between the numerous stakeholders at the Cape. And so that means we have to find better ways to integrate our planning and operations activities. And that's really key to this modernization. My team, the Spaceport Integration Office, was stood up in July of 2022, specifically out of a need. This need was identified, this need for improved integration across the spaceport. We have a challenging problem. The spaceport is a very busy and congested place. We have a multitude of commercial launch service providers that operate out of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and the Eastern Range. Some of those include ULA, SpaceX, Blue Origin. We recently had the launch from Relativity. We also have several government launch partners, including other DoD entities and NASA. Also at the Cape, we have different types of activities from non-launch stakeholders. Those are both DoD, non-DoD, and other commercial entities. Each one of these organizations makes use of shared resources at the Cape. Primarily, those include roads, wharfs, infrastructure, utilities, runways, and commodities. And each one of those organizations also performs different activities which make exclusive use of certain resources. An example might be an oversized transport that takes up a large piece of the road. And again, we are a spaceport, so the primary activity that we have to deconflict is launch. So for each launch, there's both air, land, and sea safety exclusion zones. And you're going to see that in the demo that's going to play here in just a minute. So deconflicting all of those activities to make sure that we can keep pace with future demand for the spaceport is one of the critical roles that we play. And that's why innovative efforts such as SpaceVerse are critical in order for us to keep up with increased launch cadence and other demands of the range's resources. So with that, again, thank you for having me. I look forward to answering questions at the end. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Shashi and Danny, who are going to walk us through the demo so you can see some of the amazing work that this team has done.
Thank you, Major Compton. Appreciate it. Good morning. My name is Shashi Bhushan. I'm a principal engineer in NVIDIA Corporation. With me here is Danny, and we'd like to show you this wonderful demonstrator that we put together that showcases the combination of data that we received from SLD-45 and simulation capabilities. Now, in this demonstration, we will show you how we have telemetry data coming in for both the rocket and for other assets like the F-35 in this picture right now. And we fuse all of that information into, in essence, a common operating picture inside of NVIDIA's Omniverse. From that fused picture, we send that over to visualization engines like NVIDIA's Omniverse and Epic Games' Unreal Engine. And in both of those engines, we're able to co-simulate various aspects. So in a minute, you'll see the rocket fireball and particle effects as the rocket launches into orbit. And as it's launching in, you'll see these simulation effects. The concept here is that the simulation data will be fed right back into the common operating picture and synchronized. In this initial proof of concept, we have both of these simulations running in tandem. And so they're doing that level of simulation independently. However, the telemetry data and any of the other real world data is coming in through that common operating picture. I'm going to hand it over to Danny so he can talk a little bit more onto the visualization, and then I'll come back and go into the data a little bit more.
Thanks, Shashi. So yeah, this is a great collaboration. Shashi touched on the Omniverse to Unreal connection, which you're seeing here as part of this demo. Another key piece to this is the integration of the Cesium plugin for Unreal, where we're able to take real geospatial data and plug it directly into Unreal in real time, and then use it as the backdrop for this simulation that we did, but also for other types of operations like Major Compton was talking about. Having that real world geospatial data is extremely important to that. So great capability from Cesium in terms of the plugin that they created for Unreal, but also the data that's being provided via MAXAR is also extremely important to be able to have that very high fidelity, very detailed and up-to-date geospatial data that we can just by dropping in that plugin from Cesium be able to populate it with. So yeah, a lot of very interesting lessons learned from this project, understanding some different ways of doing co-simulation, different ways of doing simulation interoperability. In this case, using the USD format for data coming from Omniverse into Unreal, as well as the GLTF format that is the basis for the Cesium plugin for Unreal. So great collaboration. Again, I think this really just touches the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we can do. And the team has already talked about quite a few different ideas on where we go next with this. Additional capability, we can integrate it from a simulation interoperability standpoint. And back to several people's points, how we bring more players to the table for this. So it's been a great collaboration, and yeah, looking forward to the rest of the discussion this morning. So Shashi, back to you.
Thanks, Danny. So let's talk about data. And I saw some questions about standardization for data exchange between layers. So fundamentally, we're not looking to bring in a brand new standard for data. What sets this apart from previous standards is the combination of geometry with the data. So we are leveraging data standards such as DIS or HLA to receive data. Now in this demonstration, we didn't use DIS, but we have several other components and plugins that are already in play that do that. So we've been working with, for example, the Air Force Research Lab to convert from DIS into USD. The particular standard that we're using here is USD, the Universal Scene Descriptor. And this is coming from Pixar, and it's starting to be standardized through the metaverse forum. And the idea here is that that data or that standardization is to couple your live data or your physical data with geometry data so you have good visualization. The way that we did this was SLD45 provided us information of the rocket launch and of the telemetry of the various aircraft. Now, this is coming in at maybe 10 hertz. So at that rate, visualization doesn't work. You need something at 30 or 60 hertz for visualization. So the very first thing we do is we ingest that data and we interpolate between the points and create the 30 or 60 hertz representation and put that into our common operating picture, which is then pushed out to all of the visualization engines so that they're lockstep in sync. And so instead of having the game engine or the visualization engine doing that interpolation, we're doing that more in the back end and keeping everything in sync. And then from that, you can start adding in all kinds of interesting simulations that may not be present in the original data and feed that back into the common operating picture. So that's a little bit about data and the standardization. And the fundamental standards that we're using here are USD for representing that geometry data with the telemetry data. And we're also utilizing 3D tiles, which Brady will come into and discuss later in the talk. But before that, I'd like to introduce you to Tim Woodard, who's a senior solutions architect at NVIDIA, who can talk a little bit more about the Omniverse aspects of this. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sashi. So as Sashi mentioned, the foundation of the platform we've been developing is universal scene description. And that's what's enabling the co-simulation. So by having a common way, a common language of describing the environment, the world, the virtual environment, it allows for many simulations to collaborate together in one ecosystem. And so with universal scene description, it effectively allows you to describe geometry about the world and then layer information with that geometry that can describe really anything that you want. And so in this way, you know, if we're talking about the metaverse as being, you know, the next iteration of the internet, you can kind of think of USD as like HTML. It's a common language that we can use to exchange information between applications. And in this way, it allows for a disaggregated architecture. As opposed to like a monolithic application that's trying to do everything, we can have multiple applications working together to provide a complete picture of what's going on. There are lots of other examples that we can talk to with respect to how USD is applying to other simulations, things like underwater acoustics or 5G signal propagation modeling. There's CFD models, and you saw the launch plume here being simulated both by Omniverse and Unreal Engine. So I think this is the idea that by having a common language, we finally have a way of having that verse of verses. And what's maybe unique here is that as opposed to previous efforts, which have had a kind of a top-down imposed standard, USD has evolved rather organically. We've seen lots and lots of industries begin adopting it as a way of describing their virtual worlds from everywhere, things including media and entertainment, product engineering and design, simulations like what we're watching here. So all of this is managed in the context of Omniverse through this idea of connectors. And you can think of a connector as just a simple little plugin that sits in each application, and it's responsible for translating to and from USD and whatever that application's internal representation of the world is. And in this way, the goal is not to replace these applications, but to allow them to communicate. And so that happens through connectors. And as Sashi mentioned, that connection's real time. It's designed to be able to operate with things like hardware in the loop sensors. So it can iterate very, very quickly in small scale changes or large scale changes in the environment. And so that's just a little bit about the USD and how it relates to the connectors and allowing all of these applications to work together in a common way. I'll turn it back to you, Sashi.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. With that, I'd like to go into the other standard that we were talking about, which is 3D tiles. Brady from Cesium would like to go into that and can provide us some more insight. Thank you.
Thanks, Shashi. Yeah, my name is Brady. I'm a director of mission support here at Cesium. So this is a unique project, so I'll work to simplify some complexity and explain what Cesium's doing here and what's being accomplished with the plugins and the extension and why I think this project's important. At Cesium, we're a small startup in Philly that's focused on two things. One is building open source visualizations for the community using open standards, which is what you're seeing here. And then also providing a commercial platform called Cesium Ion for tiling, streaming, and analyzing 3D geospatial on any device. Cesium invented and continues to evolve the 3D tiles community standard, which is key for this project, with the Open Geospatial Consortium for streaming 3D geospatial data. Our customers use the Cesium Ion platform for converting all kinds of data into 3D tiles and for streaming them for runtime performance. All this has Cesium at the confluence of graphics, geospatial, and gaming, and deeply involved in cutting-edge digital twins and simulations. So these demonstrations are built using two completely independent platforms, Unreal Engine and NVIDIA Omniverse, where the geospatial connection is being powered by Cesium. With Cesium's integrations in both Unreal and Omniverse, we're able to build geospatial worlds with the same open standards and interoperability of 3D data without the need for duplication or customization. The Cesium for Unreal plugin and Cesium for Omniverse extension are both open source, and they bring the following capabilities. First is an accurate virtual globe using global Cesium world terrain and MAXAR precision 3D mesh, and streaming to a WGS84 ellipsoid using double precision geospatial computational intrinsics. We also have an efficient 3D tiles open standard streaming engine for massive 3D geospatial data with level of detail selection, caching, and asynchronous I/O. And then Cesium Ion integration to access curated 3D geospatial data and 3D tiling pipelines to optimize real-world 3D geospatial data for streaming. And that's the what you're seeing in the demo there comes from that MAXAR precision 3D mesh. So this project is important because this whole group is proving the value of open standards across what I see as pretty much three core data challenges that are so common in defense simulation and digital twin use cases. The first is data interoperability. Making geospatial data work across many systems has historically been really costly in terms of time and resources. At Cesium, we've automated the solution using an open standard for streaming that anyone can use, which of course is 3D tiles, and it produces a beautiful runtime performance. The second is repeatable systems integration. As digital twins, synthetic environments, simulations, whatever you want to call them, of all kinds proliferate, they're going to need to work together in a repeatable, standardized way. Integrating at the data level means successes we've had here can be had all over the place. And finally, the third is system lifecycle and sustainability. Consider that some of the first iterations of this demonstration were actually made with the Unity game engine, and now we progress it to include Unreal Engine and Omniverse Create. Bringing in 3D tiles with open source plugins and extensions makes it easy for anyone to build on past successes and avoid reinventing the wheel. And I'd ask anybody who's interested in bringing their data in a precise scalable globe into any one of these systems, check out Cesium.com and try the plugins and extension for yourself with a free community account. And to talk more about the data, I'll be followed by Chris at MAXAR, who can tell you more about what we brought in here.
Thanks, Brady. I appreciate our partnership that's formed between Cesium and MAXAR on this collaborative endeavor. Unfortunately, some of you might have noticed that I'm wearing a tie today. I'm physically in the Washington, D.C. area, actually, about a few blocks away from the Pentagon. So I'm probably pretty close to where Mike Torres is sitting right now in terms of the physical universe, as opposed to this virtual one that we're in today. So the SpaceVerse conference that we're in, General Chance Saltzman, the chief of space operations, was just speaking this morning about the need for training environments to improve readiness for the Guardians, and reiterated how space is a congested, contested, competitive environment. To which I've been recently adding during some talks that I've been giving is it's also commercial and collaborative. And this partnership that in working this SpaceVerse is a great example of that. And it's only just the beginning. So at MAXAR, we're a space and Earth intelligence company that our roots can go back to the 60s for our space side. And current satellites that we have launched, et cetera, are numerous communication satellites, but also your Sirius XM satellites that you might enjoy, satellite-based radio, from. We're also in the middle of building our next generation of Earth intelligence satellites called Legion, and we'll be starting to launch those this year. The 3D registered mesh network that Brady was talking about is built off of a foundation of a constellation of satellites that we have been operating for several decades, since the 90s. And over time, we have developed a library. It's on the order of 138 petabytes of data hosted on the Amazon cloud. And that imagery as our library archive, as well as real-time imagery that folks are seeing in sensor to decision maker type operations, as you've seen in perhaps Ukraine this past year, actually about 13 months now, for that. So that's the pointy end of the sense of our sensing capability, and this is the foundational capability. So this our precise 3D registered library is on the order of a resolution of 30 to 50 centimeters resolution, and an overall locational accuracy on the order of less than 3 meters. For that. So that's the kind of the underpinning that is created through that synergy of building a commercial remote sensing constellation, and then creating a foundational data set, so that the SpaceVerse is taking advantage of work that we have done in geospatial analytics for the Army in their One World Terrain program, and that is working the transition to other government users like SpaceVerse. And what's exciting about that is that government buys once, and then we can repurpose that. So that's one of our key customers, as well as what you see for foundational layers in your Google Maps, et cetera. So that collaboration between industry and academia and the government, as well as international partners, is the key to making that successful. And where we've really had a great deal of success in this project and others is working in a badgeless environment, like that. And we start our development work, and we test it, and we train on it, and then then there's the big transition to operations, and let that feedback loop happen and continue. And this is where we become a program of record for like the One World Terrain. Where we hope to go, one of the things that is a new capability that we've been allowed by the U.S. government to provide here recently is called non-Earth imaging, so that we can also, it's satellites taking images of other satellites. And so when we look at a SpaceVerse and look at that congested environment and the need for engineering analysis for problems on certain spacecraft, et cetera, that can have you can do a lot of capabilities for that, for those of you like Major Compton who have worked in satellite operations very often, you're troubleshooting in the blind so that hopefully we can put eyes on from one of our MAXAR satellites. For doing that. So what that allows then is to fill in the layers that Tim was talking about in terms of there's the virtual environment, an augmented environment, as well as a real one. So we hope to create the underpinning for here's a more realistic environment. Happy to answer more in questions, but until then, I'm going to hand it back over to Danny next.
Great, Chris, thank you very much. I'm also relatively close to the Pentagon, but luckily not having to wear a tie today. So, but no, thank you for that overview, Chris, and thanks to the entire team for the discussion so far. It's been great. This project has been great. It's one where we've had the chance to work with Cesium, who we've worked with quite a bit in the past, but it's been a great opportunity to work more closely, specifically on an Omniverse collaboration with Unreal, which is newer on our end. So that's been a great opportunity to work with the team at NVIDIA. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Danny Williams. I work at Epic Games as a technical account manager on the simulation team. So our relatively small team at Epic is focused on the simulation industry as a whole and their use of Unreal for a variety of projects. A key piece to pretty much everything all our customers are doing with Unreal is the support for open standards. And again, this project is a great example of why it's important and the power behind that. In this case, we've used the 3D tiles, GLTF format for the terrain. We've used USD in a really unique way, I think, in terms of being able to bring the data from the Omniverse into Unreal. So that's been a great learning experience. It's been a great opportunity to sort of push the edges of our capabilities and really learn quite a bit. But yeah, it's important. The other interesting and important piece about this, everyone on this project, everyone that was involved, is our support for all open standards. We've all come from a background where organizations like CISO, like OGC, like the Metaverse Standards Forum, a newer group, I have come together and really focused on the need to support open standards, improve upon open standards, and make sure that we continue to work on them so that we can do great collaborations, great projects like this. So it's been great to see. It's been great to see everyone's interest in continuing to drive that idea of supporting open standards. And of course, thanks to NTSA for bringing us to this conversation to this audience, because I think obviously that's a great organization that's supporting that very idea of open standards. From the Unreal side, this has been again a great collaboration. We've learned a lot, and it's really brought to light some of the key features that we've been working on over the last year. Unreal version 5 was released about a year ago, and there were some key pieces of that we brought to market that were sort of key in delivering this capability, building this capability. A real key piece to that is the idea of being able to do photorealism in real time. The idea of real time has been around for a long time. In simulation, we've done it quite a bit. The idea of photorealism has been around for a long time, but for the longest time, those have been two separate paths. If you wanted to do real time, you had to sacrifice some things from a photorealism standpoint. If you wanted to do photorealism, you couldn't do it in real time. And that's worked. We've developed pipeline for those two different approaches, depending on the project, depending on the kind of work we're doing. With the release of Unreal 5, we've really pushed the boundaries and said, let's remove that barrier. Let's be able to do photorealism in real time. And Unreal 5, there's two key capabilities. There's many capabilities that help it, but there's two key ones that were released, one called Nanite and one called Lumen. I won't go into overwhelming detail on those, but the basic idea is, one, how do we get the highest fidelity 3D content, be it geospatial data, be it 3D models of rockets, whatever that content is, how do we get the highest fidelity, the best quality data for content into an engine and be able to visualize it in real time? And so Nanite gives us that ability to bring in that geometry without having to scale it down so that it can run in real time. Again, something that we've always had to do in the past. Excuse me. The other, it's great content is great. High fidelity content is great. But if you can't accurately light that environment, if you can't have the environment look realistic from the sun's perspective, from the moon's perspective, from whatever lighting conditions you're in, then you only get part of the way there and you're not really achieving photorealism. So the other feature that came out as part of Unreal 5 is called Lumen. And Lumen is a global illumination system that gives us the ability to dynamically change our lighting environment to accurately represent what the real world looks like. And so those two technologies, again, there's a lot of information out there about what the details of those two, but those really are the key elements that allow us to do this photorealism capability in real time, which is, again, core tenet of really what we're trying to drive with Unreal. That photorealism piece is really only half of the equation. The other piece is the physical world and being able to represent the physical world, not just visually, but to a level of accuracy so that we can do very complex things from a physics calculation perspective, but also so that we can simulate things at a scale broader than just a small little play box, which has typically been, the way we've faked these environments. We said, let's just constrain it to a small area and we can get our point across. But when you start talking about the SpaceVerse, where you can't constrain it, I mean, by the nature of space, we need to be able to go from where we are on the surface of the Earth out to orbit, out to the moon, out to the entire solar system. And one of the big challenges with that is the lack of support for double precision in a lot of simulation technology that exists and gaming technology. And so the other big feature that came out in Unreal 5 last year was the switching everything from 32-bit precision, single precision in the previous versions of Unreal over to 64-bit double precision in Unreal 5. And so, again, that gives us a whole bunch of new capability that we've had to sort of, work around in the past when we didn't have this. Some of it has to do with, again, precision of representing location in large environments, be it the surface of the Earth or in outer space. You need to have that level of precision to be able to simulate things at all those different locations. But then also for physics calculations, when you're doing very detailed calculations of the physical world on how rockets behave and how physics behave in those environments, you need to have that level of precision to be able to accurately represent that and calculate that data. So that's been a big push. And again, we're seeing in the simulation community a lot of interest and adoption of Unreal because of these two key pieces that we brought to market as part of this. So again, it's been great to see that come to light as part of this example that we worked on. We're really looking forward to where we go next here. And Mike, Major Compton, several others have touched on the idea that this is really just a prototype or an MVP to look at what can we do in the direction of what the Space Force is trying to achieve. And so we proved out some ideas. I think we also raised a ton of new questions. And so I think it's very interesting to see what we do next. We have a number of discussions going on amongst this team and some broader players about, how do we build out the SpaceVerse? What does it mean? What do we need to focus on from a standards perspective? What kind of data do we need to bring into this environment from a geospatial perspective, from a space-based object perspective? How do we collaborate and bring all of that together into a single picture, a single environment? And so I think will be very interesting to see where we go next with that. The last thing I wanted to share before I hand it back over to Jen, I think, for Q&A is if anybody's interested, I know there's been a bunch of technical questions, which I think we're trying to answer in real time here. We also, as part of this team, we wrote up a tutorial or an overview of this project. I'll share a link in the chat to that. It basically just goes over, again, the components of Cesium's capability, MAXAR's capability, Omniverse capability, what that architecture looks like, and just a little bit of details. And I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out to Alvin Bergeret, my teammate on the simulation team here at Epic, who did all of the Unreal development work, worked with Shashi and his team on the Omniverse side, on the NVIDIA side. So thank you, Alvin. And again, I'll share that link of Alvin's tutorial in the chat here. And Jen, back to you for Q&A.
Thanks, Danny. Great questions that are going on in the chat. If you have them, please feel free to jump on. As I mentioned at the very beginning, and Mike did as well, we are growing this ecosystem. So very interested in your capabilities that you have and how we could bring them into the ecosystem. But I really liked Greg Klaus's question. Computational physics and engineering analyst here. He says, Cesium and Unreal are beautiful tools for data visualization. I am going to add Omniverse into that mix. And Greg has made great use of them. But he believes the true value will come from high fidelity computational simulation on the front end of that for predictive analytics. How are these capabilities currently viewed to contribute overall? So excellent question, Greg. I see head shaking on our side. So over to the team. Who wants to take this one?
So,
Go ahead, Mike, please.
Speaking from a non-technical perspective, I always say I'm the ugly face with a pretty voice. I got the talent and the beauty behind me, right? But speaking exclusively from an operational perspective, going back to the goal of co-simulation, which isn't replica environments, it's the same environment across multiple platforms in a distributed fashion. That's the big challenge that we're facing is in an operational state, whether it's militarized or commercialized, one of the major architectural layers that we're going to have to account for is the sensor layer that's producing continuous and live streaming of temporal data that has to literally hop multiple models of physics, depending on what celestial bodies we're going against, what atmospheres we're crossing, what orbits we're passing, and so on. So the general premise is right now the technology does not allow us to have true real-time, true fidelity of data exchange to allow for that live transfer. But that's primarily due to archaic perspectives on network architecture, and more importantly, our struggle to come together as a community to define a common exchange standards. Even amongst the big players, when I speak to them, they come to me, yeah, we use open standards, and I've learned to ask this question, but are your competitors using the same standard? And I think that's the secret sauce, is we need the competitors to come together and not to agree to one exchange standard, but let's all as a community agree to a common exchange standard, which will be the first step in being able to do live streaming of temporal data as it's being produced using the virtual and physical sensors of reality and virtual reality. So I'll pause there and I'll let the smart people, talk the engineering stuff. Hand it over to you, Danny.
Thanks, Mike. I was just going to add, from an interoperability standpoint, I think I don't want to say that I want to go too far and say the opportunities are endless, but I think given that the big focus of this project has been on how do we think open standards first, and then figure out what that means in terms of what people might come to the table with capability, different simulation functionality. And I think, Mike, you've expressed this many times that you might not know, any number of people, any number of stakeholders might come to the SpaceVerse and say, hey, I've got this tool that I've built, or I've got this capability, I want to plug it in. And the only way we allow that to happen is to everyone's point, agree that open standards are key. And as long as we're all committed to that and working towards that, then that person can bring their tool, whatever it happens to be, to the question. If your tool, if your capability supports open standards, well, then you should be able to plug into that. So I think that's maybe a little overly simplified, given what kinds of tools you might be talking about. But I think that's the gist and the heart of really what we're trying to achieve and show, is that here's an environment that anybody can come to, that anybody can step into, assuming that we're all focused on the open standards piece.
I'm going to approach the question on predictive analytics a little bit differently. And Mike, I don't think this is too technical. So you're absolutely right. This is going to be a journey, in the development here of the capabilities, and this is not going to happen overnight. If anybody thinks it is, they need to get head examined. I'm going to bonus off of what Danny said, though, and what he called photorealism. There's also multiple ints that will be applied in order to get to predictive analytics. So you can not just on the electro-optical side, MAXAR's known specialty, but we also have other, our bench strength when it comes to the various infrared spectrums, the long wave infrared, medium wave, short wave infrared capabilities, and what that provides for information and analytics for heat signatures and capabilities. Then we can layer onto that our synthetic aperture radar capabilities and moving target indication capabilities. So synthetic aperture radar, for nighttime. We've also been able, because of ambient light around around military bases, and quite frankly, military parades in, say, North Korea, we've been able to image at nighttime as well. So we have a nighttime imaging capability. So that combination, it is going to take some time to build the trust on as you bring the various ints together, as well as the tools that Danny was talking about, in order to hash that out and to go from a development environment to an operational one. But we're on the journey. We're at the ground floor in early stages of this journey together, and we just need to keep collaborating. Your questions are right and hard ones, but let's keep at it.
Hey, it's Brady. I'd probably add to that. One of the good stories about the data that we're showing here, the geospatial data that we got from MAXAR, is that it's in the 3D Tiles 1.1 standard, which was published by the Open Geospatial Consortium in January. A lot of the updates from 3D Tiles 1.0 to 1.1 come from requirements that came from the Army about how metadata needs to be able to be viewed at runtime inside simulations like this. So, and that's one of the reasons why we chose the MAXAR Precision 3D data for this. Is it's a good representation of Army One World Terrain well-formed format, which is an extension of 3D Tiles 1.1. And the practical matter of that is that the standard itself at the data level is made so that in a simulation, in some sort of visualization like this, you should be able to go up to a building that's in the data set or a spot on the ground. And if there's metadata embedded in that visual representation, you should be able to get that at the click of a mouse. So that's great for, analysts looking at this at runtime. But for, engineers and people using machine learning and AI tools and wanting to apply a number of different machine learning and AI tools in order to do things like segmentation and classification and be able to, sort to find a needle in a haystack in that data, that's now exposed at runtime as well. So making the metadata quickly and easily available for tools for predictive analytics is exactly why this data open standard was chosen and why it's being applied here.
Thanks, Brady. Tim, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say that from a computational physics and predictive analytics perspective, this is really at the heart of a lot of the challenges that we're working to solve here at NVIDIA with things like high performance computing, accelerated computing, and artificial intelligence. There have been some really amazing advancements in the last year or so with respect to physics-informed neural networks, for example. And so being able to have predictive capabilities that inform physics in an operational digital twin is perhaps one of the most valuable byproducts of an effort like this, I think. Being able to see what might happen given the current state of the environment and make choices informed from those predictions is, I think, going to lead to just incredible advantages. So I think it's a great question and one that we're going to see, as others have alluded here in the discussion. We'll see this evolve over time. This is not something that's going to happen quickly, but it is exciting to see all of these things coming together. It's accelerating. No pun.
Thanks, Tim. There are a number of individuals in the chat thread that are very interested in being part of the ecosystem. Mike, I believe you've got an email address that we distributed recently. It would be great if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat so people could reach out. Thank you, Mike. Great technical questions going on in the chat. I'm going to throw a little bit of a softball into the mix. Someone submitted a question beforehand. What were some of the most challenging aspects of the program? And I think that's very important, as all of us on this call are very interested about getting into this space. So I see Danny shaking his head. Do you want to lead off, Danny?
Sure. I think, I mean, there were a handful of challenges. I think, in particular, USD as a format it's relatively new to be using that in the way that we used it on this project. You know, we were really trying to look at its potential as a way of simplifying the sharing of 3D graphical data in this particular manner in simulation. It's a well-established standard in the media and entertainment space. It was actually developed by Pixar as a way of sharing, data for animated movies. But it's very different to use it in this kind of an environment. So I think understanding, what we all know from a simulation interoperability standards perspective and how those work. This was sort of a different way of looking at it, and it's got its advantages and it also has its challenges. So I think just talking through what those were and working through not just what we were trying to achieve with this demo, that was one piece of it, but more broadly, what does it mean longer term? What is UST's place in the standards ecosystem, and how, where does it work really well? Where does something else maybe work better? How do we, and Shashi, you touched on this, how do we marry it up with some of these standards that have been around a longer time, like DIS or HLA? So I'm not sure that that's a direct answer to your question, Jen, but I think it was interesting to start looking at USD in the context of the broader simulation, the interoperability standards context, and understanding what's the right way to use it. How do we use it? So, and certainly there were some detailed technical challenges in, like, how do we make this work? And that was some fun work that we did with the NVIDIA team. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. Shashi or Tim, I don't know if you have perspective on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of paint a picture here. The king of proprietary, unstructured, non-standardized data is the government. We have pockets upon pockets upon pockets of. I can't even explain the complexities of standardization in the government. The government believes itself to be very standard, but it depends on who you're talking to. This entire project took a highly unstandardized data set. And for those that don't believe that standardization of exchange is possible, we did it. We did it with government data. We did it with government data that is following a standard that is dated longer than some of us have been engaged in these activities. And we were able to convert them. When I say we, not me, I'm not the talent, but Sashi, Major Andrew Compton, his team, Tim, Danny and his team, Chris and his team, they were all, and of course Brady, they were all able to come together and figure out how to quickly write APIs and scripts to convert this highly proprietary structure into a format that can be exchanged using USD. So for those that don't believe it's possible, or that believe it's too difficult because corporate data is too proprietary or unstandardized, the transformation has always been the journey of every data project. And that's not going to be any different to this particular transformation. So with that, I'll leave you with that thought, that my biggest challenge right now is getting everyone to agree to talk to each other. One, competitor to competitor, talking to each other, and then being open-minded, right? Being open-minded enough to come to a compromise on what the open standards should look like for exchange. And if anything, this particular exercise proves 2 things. There is no proprietary to proprietary that isn't compatible with an open standards exchange model. And 2, there are no set of competitors that are too separated that can achieve success when they come together. And right now we have, literally half a dozen of them at the table, which was impressive in itself. And for those of you that know, Unity was also part of this effort in phase one of this. So we were able to do this with Unity through a different model, and now with Epic and Omniverse with different models. So really, all the players are coming together to kind of work this entire situation out. So I thank them, but that's really the biggest problems that I'm looking for all the partners in the industry to come together and figure out. And a shameless plug, Standards Metaverse Forum is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to creating a standard suite for verse-to-verse communication and exchange. CISO has been an organization long-standing since the 70s or 80s that has been developing standards for modeling and sim. And more importantly, we're not looking to create new standards. We're looking to leverage the best of breed that it currently exists. And I'll hand it back over to the team.
Thanks, Mike. Excellent answer. Greatly appreciate that. So we've talked a lot about how important open standards are, how this ecosystem came together, some of our challenges. What I'm seeing now is, where are we going from here? So how are we taking this forward? Major Compton, how is your organization going to leverage what we've built, and where do you see the future and the vision are? As well as then I'll let other people think about their thoughts as we go forward.
Jen, that's a great question. So we see this as a prototype tool to help inform our way ahead for the mainly the big challenges that we face at the range, which are how do we provide the connectivity, and how do we proliferate the sensor networks that we need to pull in the data in order to feed the digital twins. So for us, this is a great effort. Mike said it best. The greatest challenge overall for this project was bringing together these different companies into a partnership to solve this problem. And now that we have this prototype capability, it's informing the other pieces, the other critical paths towards implementation. So for us, we see this as just an incredible, it provides incredible value to help inform our way ahead, so we can start buying down those future challenges, such as the connectivity and proliferation of sensors.
Thank you, Major Compton. Anyone else? Forward thinking, future vision? I mean, I will be very excited to say that, we showcased this at ITSIC last year, and we're already looking at how we're going to take it to the next level for ITSIC this year. So we're excited about those of you that are going to join the ecosystem, how we can showcase your skills and capabilities from a metaverse capability perspective. But others?
So I just want to, actually, there's a vision and then there's thank you. So, there's a sentence from the Bible, where there's no vision, the people perish. And so I remember when Dr. Lisa Costa at the SpaceVerse Chief Technology and Innovation Officer first spoke about the SpaceVerse, and we brought her in, showed her. She was already familiar from her time at Special Operations Command, the kind of things that MAXAR does for visualization and mapping georegistration, that kind of thing. So great conversation, and iterated with her on that, as well as I've had multiple great conversations with Major General Steve Purdy who's now down in Florida. That kind of leadership is necessary for the rest of us to sit shoulder to shoulder and work through the issues in order to make progress that Mike was talking about. And then it's a matter for I think it's for the vision to happen. We're going to need to get some more successes like this under our belt using the SpaceVerse. We've got one. Here's a use case. Let's work on the next one and the next one, and eventually that becomes okay. Then we start getting the test and training community and the operational community will get the pull from them as we build that use case of capabilities and build trust with that community. That's where I'd like to go with this. That's what I've seen as successful in other programs I've worked on in my 26 years when I was in government, as well as 5 years on the commercial side. Thanks.
And Chris, you reminded me, and shame on me for not mentioning it earlier. Dr. Lisa Costa is the Chief Technology and Innovation Officer for the U.S. Space Force. She coined the term SpaceVerse, and she developed and is leading the vision for the SpaceVerse. I am working for her to help her achieve that. So the one thing I want to share with the community as a takeaway is the government is more and more warming up to the idea that we do not want silos of excellence. We don't want proprietary. I myself, a lot of vendors and a lot of industry partners and a lot of academic organizations have reached out to me. And the only thing I emphasize to them, even before they engage me, is if this is not a community engagement, a community solution, if you're trying to sell me a black box, we're not. It's a non-starter. I don't want the government to define standards. I don't want the government to define the technology stacks or the platforms. I want the government to be demanding customers, defining the functional needs of the product, and that's it. That's where we start and that's where we stop. But what that requires is an effort on industry's part, both large and small business, to come together before you engage us, to work out not strategic partnerships, but community collaboration on how VersaVerses is going to operate realistically in a public forum. On the military side, the last thing is one thing that we haven't talked about, which could be a conversation, entire panel on its own, is security. Security for SpaceVerse, security for an operational VersaVerse environment is critical and unprecedented. The security that we have today will not satisfy our ability to engage, not only from a militaristic perspective, but also from a corporate perspective, for protection of data, protection of asset, and protection of user. We haven't discussed it, but it is actively on our minds, and we're actively trying to engage industry and academia to help us solve a lot of these problem statements around security from a user perspective, an encryption perspective, a transport perspective, and so on. So with that, I'll hand it back over.
Thank you, Mike. I think that was an incredibly important comment to end on today. We're a couple of minutes over, but we really enjoyed the time. We could spend the rest of the day talking to everyone that's on this call. Your questions were fantastic. We have about 200 others that we're going to try and get to and answer those and get back to you. But with that, I just want to say thank you very much. I look forward to working with you in the ecosystem, so please reach out. Back to you, Linda.
Thank you. Wow. What exciting innovations and challenges and opportunities to create SpaceVerse through technologically advanced capabilities. Thank you all, and to you, Jen, for pulling together such a talented pool of experts. To our audience, we hope you enjoyed today's session and found it as fascinating and informative as I did. Our next webinar will be on Wednesday, May 17th at 11 o'clock Eastern. We'll hear from the executives of the services about the future of training and issues they face as a preview to TSIS 2023, which will be held in Orlando in June. Check the NTSA website for details and registration for these and other events. Meanwhile, have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for joining the NTSA webinar series. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.